Добрий день, я вітаю всіх, хто приєднався до нас.
Good morning. I want to thank everyone who joins us. My name is Oleh. It is my pleasure to welcome you at Ukraine Media Center. Another sleepless night under strike, but still we have invited you to discuss a complex and difficult topic. The topic of our today's conversation is the conscripts in the area of active combat operations, legal and humanitarian questions in Bakhmut and Soledar. So in the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the conscripts of the military unit 3017 of the National Guard of Ukraine, their families were expecting them to be demobilized, but still in 2022 they were sent to Bakhmut area, in the area of most intense combat operations, and for the time being at least 35 conscripts of the National Guard of Ukraine are considered missing in action or prisoners of war. So let's discuss it with our today's speakers. Let me introduce them. Joining us in the studio today are Olena Belyachkova, coordinator for families of POWs and missing persons, Media Initiative for Human Rights. Also joining us is Natalia Shubak, mother of a conscript soldier missing in action near Soledar. Also joining us is Oleh Hushchyn, representative of the coordination headquarters for the treatment of prisoners of war. Yevhen Danilenko, deputy head of the Department of Communications of the Secretariat of the Commissioner for the Persons Missing in Action under Special Circumstances, and also Vitaly Shubak, Deputy Head of the Department of Personnel of the National Guard of Ukraine. So thank you for joining us today. And Ms. Olena, I would like to give the floor to you and discuss why Media Initiative for Human Rights touches upon this topic now and why is it important. Thank you for the support of this topic. Why is it important? Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, we've been supporting the families quite actively. We focus our attention on the importance of reunification of the families, bringing back the prisoners of war, and so on. Ms. Natalia addressed us, mentioning that there are conscripts who have status of missing in action or prisoners of war. So their engagement in combat operations, we remember there were such facts. The unit that was located in Hostomel, those conscripts who ended up in the area of active combat operations, and it seemed like they had the same status as other military that were mobilized or those serving under contract. But when you try to find out the details, to what extent those conscripts, first of all, did the state had a right to have them engaged in active combat operations, or were they supposed to fulfill defense functions at the places of their permanent location? We know that the conscripts demonstrated themselves quite heroically in the battles under Kiev, and they were realizing that they had to demonstrate the skills that they were mastering during their military service. But when you try to identify the amount of social guarantees of the conscripts, according to the data that were mentioned during the meetings in the coordination headquarters with the National Guard, about 35 are still in captivity or have a status of missing in action. So it's a small category, but it's still there. So the amount of social rights and guarantees is lesser than those provided to the mobilized or those serving under contract. However, they fulfill the same type of tasks and duties when it comes to defense of their homeland. The families experience an identified loss, so they are supposed to be protected at the same level as the families of other military, either mobilized or those serving under contract. So Media Initiative for Human Rights studied the standards of our legislation is being equalized when it comes to additional remuneration and identification of larger amounts of salary during fulfillment of combat duties, but it's still not finalized, and the amount of benefits is not the same as for the mobilized. And those serving under contract, for example, the conscripts come back for rehabilitation, then they undergo the medical military commission, and when they get identified, their retirement pension is being calculated based on other parameters because their basic salary is smaller, but still they lose their health. They experience the same amount of tortures in captivity, so the level of your remuneration should be equalized. And the resolution of Cabinet of Ministers number 153 on additional remuneration for the category of servicemen aged 18 to 24. We understand that conscripts are also of more or less the same age, but the resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers doesn't regulate any payments to the conscripts who failed to sign a contract just because they didn't have time for it. They ended up in captivity or were gone missing in action. So all those solutions are being developed with the participation of Ms. Oleh Reshetilova, the military ombudsman, and with the command of the National Guard. The agreement was reached to develop the amendments to the legislation that would enable the guys who are hopefully coming back from captivity so that they could get the same amount of social rights and guarantees as other families, as other servicemen. So this category is there. It may be inconvenient for the state because we understand that those who were defending Mariupol, when they ended up in captivity but sending conscripts to other regions, was there really such a necessity? Wasn't the amount of troops there sufficient, so it had to be reinforced with the conscripts? But still, the state has to continue being responsible for those conscripts. That's why we decided to study this topic, and we tried to support the families so that their fight, the struggle, doesn't become only their own struggle, but us as the human rights organization could help them to seek their rights and benefits. Thank you, Ms. Natalia. I would like to ask you to share a personal story. Good morning to everybody in this room. First of all, I would like to thank Media Initiative for Human Rights, the journalist Yana Ilkiv, who wrote an article. Yesterday, the first article was issued about our conscripts. We united, and now we try to get more families, united families of those 35 conscripts. The families from 3 military units, 3017 Kharkiv, 3033 Zaporizhia, and 3057. We try to seek more information, find more families, and to end them because our pain, our problems are the same, to bring back our guys and to solve and to seek social guarantees for them. I want to thank also Ms. Olena. And the first thing, when our sons were engaged in combat operations, we never expected the state and the commanders to resort to engaging them in combat operations on the forward edge of the battle area. So far, this question cannot be answered. Why did the conscripts from Kharkiv, from our unit, end up in a completely different part of Ukraine? references to regulations, resolutions. No one was able to specify it for us so far. Miss Natalia, can you please tell us your story, the story of your son? The son was drafted in the spring of 2021, and he was serving in the National Guard unit in Kharkiv, where he met the full-scale invasion. During the first days in the beginning, he was in a military unit, and then he was involved in liberation of Kharkiv region, the settlements of Tishki, Pitomnik, and then there was quite a difficult liberation of Kupiansk. And in December 2022, beginning of January 23, our conscripts ended up in Soledar and Bakhmut. The command of our unit and the higher command of the National Guard and the armed forces, they knew that PMC Wagner was raging there back then, and they were fighting against Wagner. Some of our guys were confirmed as prisoners of war taken by Wagner. Out of 35 conscripts, 11 are confirmed as prisoners of war, 10 of them confirmed by the Red Cross, and 10 more are considered missing in action. We have another question. Why don't the conscripts end up in the groups of those who are being exchanged under Istanbul agreements? There were a couple of exchanges, but no conscripts were returned. We're asking to set up special request, a special group of the conscripts. Yes, everybody should be brought back, but for the youngest ones, among them was 19 back then, after 1 year of participation in combat operations. When it comes to social guarantees, as Ms. Olena has mentioned, there's a lot of questions. Who knows how many guys, how many conscripts got free from captivity? How many of them are considered disabled? Those former conscripts, they don't have the same amount of guarantees as the others. They are getting way less, and those pensions are not sufficient for their rehabilitation, for their medicines, for their life. The captivity is lasting for 2 months, or this status of missing in action. It's 34 months. So what's the status of your son? Is being searched, so no information about him. Mr. Vitaly, a question to you then. We would like to discuss it with you. What were the issues touched upon Ms. Olena and Ms. Natalia, and what the units were guided by as the conscripts were engaged in combat operations? Was there a legal background? Was there an operational necessity? What was the reason behind it? Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your invitation. So when it comes to our conscripts in the military unit 3017, they met the full-scale invasion in Kharkiv, and the unit itself is located in such a part of the city that when the enemy was approaching, that unit almost ended up in occupation. The conscripts, back then, the unit was stuffed with the conscripts, almost 70%, and they took up the arms to defend Kharkiv and Kharkiv region. Obviously, they were demonstrating their professionalism. That's the first thing to talk about. When our mobilization resources started coming to the military units, the soldiers were holding the line, defending the forward edge. On the 1st of January 2023, I apologized the National Guard during the full-scale invasion when the martial law was announced. The National Guard is being resubmitted to the armed forces of Ukraine, so we start fulfilling these are those commands of the command of the armed forces of Ukraine. And we got a battle order that military unit 3017 is supposed to be fully relocated to defend Bakhmut and Soledar. And it was mentioned like in full. Back then, we were asking about the conscripts, and we got the same answer. They're all servicemen, and their duty is to defend their homelands. So back then, there was no segregation, mobilized, contract-based, or a conscript. And back then, the military unit moved to defend Bakhmut and Soledar. Back then, in Bakhmut, there were about 300 conscripts, and in Soledar, there were about 70 conscripts. So it was their duty to fulfill that combat order. And when it comes to the losses among the conscripts, in the National Guard, we have 16 missing in action, 12 in Bakhmut and 4 more in Soledar. That's specifically from the units 3070. Mr. Vitaly and both Ms. Natalia and Ms. Olena were saying that there are problems when it comes to the difference in social guarantees between the conscripts and those mobilized and contract-based. So what's your take on that? Are you taking any actions to remove the difference, to mitigate it? Thank you for your question. The National Guard keeps meeting the families of those missing in action on a continuous basis. And as soon as we found out about those problems, the main directorate came up with an initiative to submit the amendments to the legislation to equalize the social guarantees when a conscript, in compliance with the resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers, has a salary from 300 up to 700 hryvnia. Back then, the difference between the conscripts and contract-based was, in terms of salary, was about 20,000 hryvnia. And during the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the conscripts demonstrated themselves way more professional. Obviously, when we were facing those problems, we submitted the amendments for the legislation to equalize the salary. Then the amendments were made to that resolution, and the salary of the conscripts was increased up to 6,000 hryvnia, but still there is more than 14,000 hryvnia difference. So that's what we were able to fulfill. Later, when resolution number 153 of the Cabinet of Ministers was issued about motivation of the servicemen, it didn't mention anything about the conscripts whatsoever. In October 25, we submitted more suggestions to include the conscripts in the amendments to the resolution number 153. So currently we're waiting. When it comes to National Guard, we've done it on our part. So should the amendments be voted for, what is it going to change? Those servicemen considered missing in action, the funds will be accrued on their deposit accounts, and as soon as they come back from the enemy's territory, they will be able to receive that money. So that money will be accrued in their deposit accounts. Thank you for that. And Mr. Evgen, I would like to ask you a question. What are the difficulties with the search of the conscripts missing in action? Is this process different compared to other categories and other algorithms for search? Yes, thank you for the question. In fact, the operations of the Secretariat of the Commissioner for Persons Missing under Special Circumstances is quite linear because we work with the consequences, with the persons who have a status of missing in action, and there are standard measures taken in relation of the conscripts. Based on the report, the data is being added to the register of pre-court investigation, along with all of the activities related to identification of their status, their, so to say, their destiny. And for our organization, there is no segregation, there is no gradation, because the law that we use in our operations on the legal status of the persons missing in action, in Article 7, it says that no discrimination is allowed based on any parameters, and Article 6 identifies the set of rights of the persons missing in action and their families, and it also says that there is no restriction of rights of such persons that can be allowed. So we work equally when it comes to analysis of open data, identification, search for information about possible captivity. All of the options that we can use, we use them in relation of such persons to seek necessary information. We try to stay in touch with the families of those missing in action to hear about their problems, and we are ready to get actively involved in any activities, including legislative activities that would ensure guarantee of their rights and exercising of their rights. We are in this sense, we are open to any interaction. When it comes to the work with the families, what is special there? Do all of the families know that they can address you to get such information, and is such communication sufficient? Well, our position is such that communication is never excessive. That's why we use all of the channels available to us. There is an information platform operating for the families that covers key important information. Contacts of the parties involved are regional representatives. Receive the citizens. The commissioner in Kiev has regular meetings with the families. There is a hotline 1698 where their relatives, the families, can call with their families when it comes to exercising of their legal rights or any other problematic issues, and we try to support them in all situations to the best extent possible, and we keep looking for new ways to communicate with this category of population. Thank you, Mr. Yevgen. Then, Mr. Oleh, a question to you. We've heard from Ms. Natalia the issues that she's mentioned about having the conscripts included in the lists of exchange. Are there any difficulties with having them added to such lists, and can the conscripts end up in priority list based on Istanbul agreements? So how to use it? Do you use such a tool? Good morning. So when it comes to return and prioritization, Istanbul agreements are of political nature, and there's always a compromise between the two warring parties. Formally, the Istanbul agreements don't contain any mentions of the conscripts. There's no such category mentioned. However, you'll remember one of the Istanbul priorities are the persons below 25 years. So basically all of the conscripts fall under this category, and they automatically become a priority group, priority category during the negotiation process. It doesn't necessarily mean that Russian party doesn't resist any of our proposals. Should it be so, we could have brought back the majority of our POWs. However, on Ukrainian part, there's always prioritization in every single case. If Ukraine undertakes to add certain categories of servicemen to the priority list, all of the persons below 25 years automatically are already there. Talking about your previous questions to their colleagues when it comes to communication and search, well, it's obvious that in this context, everybody is a priority. It's not like we search more for those and less for these. Respectively, all of the possible models for search, such as OSINT, open data, and the rest are used in relation to everyone, all of the persons we're talking about today, and we keep matching our list with our colleagues from the National Guard of Ukraine, so everyone is accounted for. For the family members, it means that, first of all, please use the way of communication through your personal account to the best extent possible, to the maximum extent possible. Everything you can add to the personal account, and most of all, anything that can help us identify a person, for example, based on a model of search using specialized internet algorithms. For example, if a person has a tattoo, something that can make them different from others, please add it to the personal account, and then the algorithm starts searching by that parameter in all sources available online. We have cases when thanks to some seemingly minor things, we were able to identify a person based on their tattoos or some fragment of a tattoo. That's real. Many may think if there is a cross or a picture or a picture of, say, a wedding ring, so add everything, starting from the shoe size and ending with what the serviceman was clad in last time you were seeing him. So we have public offices in all of the regions of Ukraine, which means that the persons who need communication or who need advice, including social policy advice, all those people don't have to go to Kiev. They can visit our office in their regions. And what's unique about us is that we cooperate. In fact, we coordinate the colleagues from the right and colleagues from the left. And in fact, we are the only entry point. If you need a consultation from the representatives of the National Guard, again, you don't have to go to Kiev to the colleagues from the main directorate of the National Guard. You can visit a public office in your region. And we have communication with our colleagues from the National Guard, which is like urgent. If there is any question about representatives of National Guard imprisoned, then a representative of a National Guard of the main directorate switches in immediately. So do you think there are any obstacles when it comes to bringing back conscripts specifically? Well, the negotiation process, after our victory, those involved in negotiation process will write memoirs. This negotiation process, it will always be non-public. You may see the consequences of the negotiations in our exchanges, whom the Russians exchange and in which condition. There are obviously manipulations on the side of the Russians. Sometimes those manipulations are very targeted, and they monitor the information space of Ukraine quite actively, and they know whom to target, how to press on them, and at which specific moment. But again, if the parties identify the priority list, for example, those severely ill or those under 25 years, that doesn't necessarily mean that all of our servicemen falling under those categories will be returned immediately. Unfortunately, it is so. Today, there are a lot of families waiting to have their loved ones to be brought back. Can we expedite this process somehow? Well, the process is bilateral. The negotiation groups keep working almost 24/7. The information exchange is going on a continuous basis. When we see the buses coming with the happy faces, it's only the tip of the iceberg that you're seeing. The negotiations are incredibly difficult, and they cannot be easy, efficient. They are just as efficient as they can be. Believe me, the negotiations are never stopping, never ever. Thank you. Ms. Natalia, you wanted to add something. I wanted to add that we have conscripts above 25 years who are currently 26 and 27. What about them? How can they end up in that Istanbul list if it contains any limitations? So, once again, the negotiations are based on political agreements. Political agreements are quite clear. If a person, as of the date of negotiations, was 25 years or below, so they fall under that special category. So every category is being discussed name by name. I don't know how to put it. We try to pull them from the aggressor's arms, and all of them, and we keep hearing there are priority groups, which means that they are subject to negotiations, and others are not even discussed. No, the things are not like that. Priority is a priority because they are being discussed. First of all, the following step after the negotiations is to discuss everyone. I understand clearly there is an emotional component. We keep hearing this claim that we failed to submit this or we failed to submit those for exchange. Everyone, no matter if their status is confirmed by ICRC or by the aggressor, if they are on our list as those missing in action, and we know that theoretically they may be staying in the aggressor's territory, they are all included in every list during every round of negotiations. Priority, okay, it can be a priority today. Today we discuss priority categories, but tomorrow we get back for the others. It doesn't necessarily mean that we discuss the priority lists, and those who are not on those lists, they are being abandoned and forgotten. Thank you, Ms. Olena. I would like to comment about the exchanges based on the Istanbul agreements. The coordination headquarters is the organization to which the families come with the hope to have their loved ones brought back, and we would like the coordination headquarters to cover this other topic in the same light. Why did Ms. Natalia come up with this question that there are some conscripts who are 26 and 27 years? Because during the last meeting it was discussed that the age is being calculated as of the day of being caught captive. And now, with all due respect, you're saying that the age is calculated as of the date of negotiations. So, as a human rights activist, I would like to find out, so how is the age calculated? As of the day of negotiations or as of the day of ending up in captivity? Well, probably I was sleeping too little, so it's calculated as of the moment of confirmation of the fact of disappearance, not even ending up in captivity, because you have to prove that person is in captivity. So as of the date of report that the person was gone missing. Thank you. I would like to give an opportunity to ask questions for our guests. If you have any questions on the floor, any comments, reactions, reflections. Good morning. Thank you for coming. My name is Anastasia. My question is like that. What can be done? Can some specific three things be segregated when it comes to coverage of social guarantees for the conscripts? What can the state do? Can we state like we need to do 1, 2, 3 things? What are those 3 things? Thank you. When it comes to social guarantees, like what Mr. Vitalik has said, when it comes to Resolution 153, which covers additional motivation for the servicemen aged 18 to 24, but there is a question about its practical implementation when it comes to the families of the missing in action. The Ministry of Defense was explaining that it was a part of this resolution or the benefit package, like the families of those missing in action can write reports, can submit their reports, and they would get that benefit. But practically, for what I know, this resolution doesn't regulate disbursement of benefits to the families, and the military units refuse to disburse it. So, for what I understand, the state's position is to accrue the money on the deposit accounts of the servicemen themselves, and then the deposited amount that can be inherited by the relatives should a person die. I mean, we should understand that there should be a mechanism in place, not only an explanation. So that should be one component of a social coverage. Another thing, it doesn't only apply to the conscripts, but generally when it comes to exemptions for utility services, the families of the prisoners of wars and those gone missing, they have this exemption. But still, when it comes to the parents of those missing in action, only the parents with disabilities can get this exemption if they are the parents of persons missing in action. For what we understand now, the majority of such parents don't have disabilities, and they cannot exercise that right to exemption. And also there is a lack of regulation when it comes to retirement payments and other types of benefits not contemplated for the conscripts, like one of annual payment for improvement of health condition and some other benefits. Thank you for this explanation. You made this explanation for me. Well, basically, when it comes to resolution 153, the algorithm will be aligned. Now the changes have just only started. So as the changes, for example, or the amendments are being adopted, we try to develop relevant algorithm. When there are any issues with the military units, I keep being in touch. I get calls from the families. We try to settle all those issues should they arise. And when it comes to retirement payments, we had the last meeting with the representatives of the families of the servicemen of the military unit 3017. That issue was touched upon. We've also submitted the proposals for amendments to the legislation. I think it happened back in July or August this year. So for the time being, all those processes are underway. So do we understand it correctly that the ultimate decision depends on our government? So we're waiting for that decision. Thank you. Thank you. I would like to thank everyone for this conversation, for touching upon these important and sensitive topics. I would like to thank our speakers who joined us, and I would like to thank all of the families. We'd like to wish all of the families that their sons come back home alive, at least alive. Thank you. And Ms. Natalia, you wanted to say something? Yeah, to finalize it, I would like to address Mr. President and all of the government bodies involved in negotiation processes with the request to please bring back the conscripts. We join this request. We want to thank everyone, and obviously we want to thank our security and defense forces, thanks to whom we can gather here, discuss this topic, and search for some common solutions. Thank you, and glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes.